us. Kelly Carlin joins us. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Hello. You're in town to perform a Carlin Home Companion. That's going to be happening at the Drake on the 21st and also on Saturday at Second City. A Carlin Home Companion is a look back at your life as the only daughter of George Carlin.
Yes.
And, you know, we've been saying earlier that there are a couple of names that people pull out if you talk to comedians across the board that were their inspiration. You might hear Richard Pryor, Lenny Bruce, and George Carlin every time. What a phenomenal talent your father was.
Yeah, I mean, he was really bigger than life in some ways, and yet he was my dad. And that's what I love about my show is I bring the personal dad part to it. Everyone knows the public George Carlin, and I play his videos in my show, so they get to experience that. But then it's like, okay, now let's pull back the curtain. You know, who's the man behind the curtain? And that's where I come in, and I get to tell my stories about that.
Let's take a quick look at the public George Carlin, because his style was so. There was a cadence to it and a rhythm to it, and you knew instantly you were listening to George Carlin.
That's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff. That's all your house is. Your house is just a place for your stuff. If you didn't have so much goddamn stuff, you wouldn't need a house. You could just walk around all the time. That's all your house is. It's a pile of stuff with a cover on it.
That's the mark of brilliance, when something that is so commonplace that one special mind can pick out and make it so universal and so important and special. And you were mentioning, a lot of us know the public persona, but what was the father like?
He wasn't always on at home. He wasn't one of those people, thank God. And he was, you know, he was a writer first, so he was very introverted in that way. His work was very important to him, and yet we would have a lot of fun too. I mean, I remember in high school once or junior high, we were in the market and we were doing gibberish conversations with each other, and you know, in the produce section, having an argument about oranges in gibberish, and you know, people think we're crazy, and we were having a blast, you know. So
did you realize at any stage that life was just grist for his mill? I mean, was he jotting things down at all, or get out in the middle of the night and write something down?
There was paper and pens everywhere in our house, and that was a big habit of his very early on, and that's why he was so prolific, I feel. That's why he did over 13 hours, you know, of stand-up specials, because he was always writing everything down.
Right.
Yeah.
And to add to that, you know, he's so famous for those. I mean, they're like 5-minute long rants.
Essays, basically.
Really? And so would he spend hours by himself writing these things down, or would they sort of come out in bits and pieces during dinner?
He never was a dinner kind of let's try out my material kind of stuff. He would take all those bits of paper and then he would put them together and coalesce them into a file, and then he would start to create these essays, which sometimes were like 5 or 10 minute bits. And he really built an argument in some ways, or a thesis with these items, which you could tell because he really would take you along in this beautiful logic to the craziest places sometimes. And you'd find yourself going, okay, we're going along there. This is insane.
And I wrote the word logic down. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
So you lost him young.
Well, yeah. I mean, he had heart disease, though, for over 30 years. And his cardiologist said to me afterwards, with a man of heart disease like that, we normally don't talk about them living into their 70s.
Right.
So he had just turned 71.
What do you think he would have thought of this show?
You know, he was a little uncomfortable with me talking about my life on stage, and that was the only friction we ever had in our relationship. So I'm taking this as a 49-year-old act of rebellion. I'm finally rebelling. I'm finally a teenager rebelling. But I do it with such heart and such respect, and yet bold honesty. My dad did teach me how to tell the truth, and that's what I do.
So talk about some of the details in your show.
Well, I talk a little bit about how my parents met, and then we go into the crazy, dark drug days, which is what my dad had more difficulty with me talking about. I mean, he talked about it freely. I mean, there was one day where my dad had been up for quite a few days and woke me up one morning to say that he thought the sun had exploded and that we should probably go outside and check. And being my dad, I thought, you know, maybe we should. Dads kind of know what's going on. Of course, he didn't. And then on into my adult years and our relationship with that and some of the friction of doing my own autobiographical work. And then, you know, of course, the poignant ending where he does die, you know, and it's beautifully crafted, though. Paul Provenza helped me shape this show, and he directed me, and it's been an incredible experience.
One of my favorite things about your father's comedy is that even though it seemed like he was ranting or that it was angry, it never seemed mean-spirited.
No.
And I think he was being interviewed, and he said, you know, my comedy might sound angry, but I'm not an angry man. And at home, he said he's very calm and kind. And you know, I read some of the love letters that he wrote that was published recently.
Yes, through Sally's book.
Yeah.
Yes, and very generous man, not angry. He was outraged, and his outrage was there because he was. I mean, it wasn't his job to wake people up. He felt it was his job to make people laugh, and ultimately he did. But at the same time, you know, he'd say, "Oh, I've given up on the species," and then I would say, "Oh, really, Dad? Then why are you on a stage talking to people if you've really given up?"
He had to.
And he was like, "Exactly."
He had to do that.
Yeah.
Kelly, who made him laugh?
Oh, well.
I mean, was he a Marx Brothers guy?
Yes, Marx Brothers,
Yeah.
Three Stooges. Danny Kaye was a big influence on my dad, Spike Jones.
Yeah.
And then through the years, I mean, you know, Lewis Black, he loved the up and coming comics.
Right.
He really, he loved comedy. And we would watch TV when I was a kid, and we would laugh at Bob Newhart and Kel Burnett and all those great people too.
So
yeah.
are you an observationist like your dad?
I am. I find that's what I do. I love sitting in my home thinking about the world and finding a way to communicate that. I do that now through podcasting and other ways. I'm not a stand-up, but I know like the next iteration of my career will be more about, you know, commenting and doing that kind of stuff, because I can't help it. I sit around going, what does all this mean? What's going on here?
He must have been absolutely apoplectic about this slide toward political correctness. And
Oh, well, yeah, he always, you know, language was always a big thing for
Yes.
him. So political, and you know, that's what confuses people, because my dad was basically a very progressive lefty person. He always picked people over property, but sometimes the left drove him crazy, and political correctness was a big, big part of that. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, if you want to check out Kelly's show, it's happening tomorrow at the Drake, although I understand that one's sold out now.
Yes, Saturday at Second City. We've got some tickets left. We would love to have people come
All right,
down.
that show is at 1 p.m. Saturday at Second City. Kelly Carlin. The show is called A Carlin Home Companion. Really lovely to meet you. Thank
Thank you, guys.